Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1203rd New Social Environment. I'm Magali, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Danez Smith and Mandana Chaffa. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Danez Smith is the author of four collections, including Don't Call Us Dead. Sorry. Don't Call Us Dead, Homie, and most recently Bluff, finalist for the Minnesota Book Award and the Anisfield-Wolf Book Award, and the topic of today's conversation. They're also the curator of Blues in Stereo, the early works of Langston Hughes. For their work, Danez has won the Ford Prize for Best Collection, the Minnesota Book Award, the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, and has been a finalist for the NAACP Image Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and National Book Award. Danez lives in the Twin Cities with their people and teaches at the Randolph College MFA program and the Black Youth Healing Arts Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. And our host today, Mandana Chaffa, is the founder and editor-in-chief of Norway's Journal, a periodical of Persian arts and letters and a finalist for the Community of Literary Magazines and Press's Best Magazine debut, and an editor-at-large at Chicago Review of Books. She serves on the board of the National Books Critics Circle, where she is vice president of the Barrios Book and Translation Prize and is president of the board of the Flowchart Foundation. Born in Tehran, Iran, she lives in New York. And with that, I will pass it over to Danez to get us started.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Magli, and thank you all y'all for joining us. Thank you for Mandana for being a ever welcome and pleasurable conversation partner. I'm so excited to get to talk to you again. Last time we were talking, I think over the Googles. So I'm excited we get to do this face to face this time. Okay, I'm gonna start us off with a couple of poems, and then we'll dive into the conversation. Let's see. I'm fresh out of the barbershop. And I was just there with the guy who's in this poem, so I think I would just read this poem first. Yeah, so this poem is about coming out at the barbershop. Who now I was used to be, I thought I was like out everywhere. And then I realized the barbershop was the only place that I still wasn't out. And then my hand was kind of forced a little bit. And it's wonderful. Now, like, like now he makes like little gay jokes and then like hits me on my shoulder. And as we talk about the world and all of its ills and all the wonderful things in it too. All right. Anyways, this is after my favorite New Yorker, Angel Nafis, and her poem King of Creations. This is Day was the last person I came out to. Why did I long to leave the man I wasn't, uncomplicated beneath your blade? In that brief, weekly Mecca, I wanted nothing to mark me but the edge of your sheer, cutting horizon above my brow. Our romance of money and mirrors. We trade coins for beauty and peace in the time rich forever of this shedding place. The million doors to this heaven we attend to be tapered and grown. I didn't want my facts to become the news, nor the closeness it takes a man to square a man into grace to be soured by desire or gods, or traditions that leave my kind unloved, unhoused, unknown by clippers, raggedy and unbrothered. Day, I wasn't a man. I was your clay, afraid of being banished from your hands. Loose me not from this uncled oasis where I rather be misnamed than uncounted. I curved the men I kissed into vague women in that chair, stretched my life so thin you could cut it with a whisper. I knew the world. had sharpened and accrued its jagged disciplines. I knew the world and needed this one place in it, not to be it. But then you found my poems. And then you cut my hair. Cool. All right. Word. I'll switch books real quick. I'll read a poem that I feel like is in conversation a little bit with that one from Homie, which I think we might talk a little bit about today as well. So Homie is like all about like love, I think at the end of the day. I think all my poems are love poems at the end of the day. And yeah, so this one is also about like complicated relationships and queerness and transness and all kinds of things. I think this is maybe the poem that took me the longest to write. It took me like 6 or 7 years to get this one right. Yeah, and I think continues to be a North Star for me when I think about how to get to something in the poems. I think I can do this one from memory. Waiting on you to die so I can be myself. 1,000 years of daughters, then me. What else could I have learned to be? Girl after girl, after giving herself to herself, one long ring shout name, a monarchy of copper and coal shoulders. The body, too, is a garment. I learned this best from the snake undulating out of her pork rind dress. I crawl out of myself into myself, take refuge where I flee. Once I snatched out my heart like a track and found not a heart, but 2 girls forever playing slide on a porch in my chest. Who knows how they keep time? They could be a single girl doubled and joined at the hands of. I'm stalling. I want to say something without saying it, but there's no time. I'm waiting for a few folks I love dearly to die so I can be myself. Please don't make me say who. Bitch. The garments I'd buy if my baby wasn't alive. If they woke up at their wake, they might not recognize that woman in the front making all that noise. Oof. All right. That poem hits a little bit too close to home these days. All right, family stuff, that created some interesting Thanksgivings for a while. And one thing I told my grandma, that poem is partly thinking about, she was like, "Do you want me to die?" And I said, "Absolutely not." That is my girl. If you know me personally, you know my grandma is my lady. But I told her there are some parts of her that had to die if our relationship would actually be was to actually be unconditional, you know. They always say they love you unconditionally until the conditions show up. And there's still some stuff there, right? I think parts of that poem are still true, even in just like a metaphorical sense. But you know, love, complicated. All right. Then one poem more. Let's do something from the more like poetry side of things. Cool. This is Ars Poetica from Bluff. So what you need to know about this poem is that like this is on page 119. And so before this, there's been a lot of anti-poeticas and just stuff of me like kind of beating up on poetry and stuff like that. And then you get to this line. Fuck all that other shit. Even when the fog cleared the wrong sky on my mind, the horizon at the end of pity is a useless sun. Hot-headed and bitter-born light, let the daughter rise when my earth meets the clouds. What her say? What next she believe in and nurse? My big bad for how long I spent making apologies for what I ain't do. Caught myself sorry for bodies the nation caught in its borderless maw. Caught myself washing blood off someone else's hands. I'm off that. That being the mode that made a cage of guilt out my depression. That being what fault I fell into and dressed into a lovely but ineffective grave. What I'm sorry for, making poetry into a house of rebuttals, a temple for the false gods of stagnant argument and dead-end fields. Here, in these lines, in these rooms, I add my blues and my gospels to the record of now. I offer my scratched golds to the blueprint of possible. Dear reader, whenever you are reading, this is the future to me, which means tomorrow is still coming, which means today still lives, which means there is still time for beautiful, urgent change, which means there is still time to make more alive, which means there is still poetry.
Are you kidding? Like you want me to follow that? I mean, I thought you and I were very good friends. I had a different start to it, but since you read those poems, I'd like to stay in the minute. Between that one and Anti-Poetica, I was thinking a lot about, I don't know if you ever read Bernadette Meyer's The Tragic Condition of the Statue of Liberty.
No,
Uh,
but I want to now. Oh my God, what is
yeah,
it?
yeah, I think you'd like it. I think you'd like it. And she wrote it in 1987 when New York City was asking for donations to make the Statue of Liberty look better. Um, and there's this entire litany of the things that she can't do, she can't do, she can't do, and what poetry can't do and can't do and can't do. And then she doesn't have, she literally doesn't have the money to make it any better, but I can offer you this poem.
Mm,
So between Anti-Poetica and this Ars Poetica, it's really thrilling to me that you are talking about all the things that poetry kind of can't do, but
mm-hmm,
in the same time, you're proving what poetry can do and can be. It it may not change the world, but it changes people, and those are the people that can potentially change the world.
mm-hmm.
So even in your kind of early negation of it, I I see very clearly how poetry indeed has even changed you. I can tell you 100 million reasons why your poetry has changed me or other people in this audience. But
Mm,
I think through those, I had this sense of how poetry has changed who you are, how you
mm-hmm.
express yourself, and who you hope to be through it.
Yeah. How has poetry changed me? Oh my God. I think poetry, since I first fell in love with it in like ninth grade, has been a space to rehearse and try out telling the truth. There were so many things that I think I got to admit aloud for the first time in poetry, right? I think the first time, a word like I am gay, was like came out of my body, was pen to page, right? Trying to write a poem. The first time I got to talk about the violence that was evident and prevalent in the home I grew up in, outside of the home I grew up in, was in a poem. I think there have been so many revelations in my life that have manifested themselves for the first time within the lines of a poem. And so I think poetry has long been a container for my dreams, for the truth, for my anxieties, for the truth, whether the truth was one that allowed my spirit to bloom, or whether it was a truth that gave my spirit the permission to grieve, and to wither a little bit. Poetry has been that container. It has also changed my life by just like, I do think truth telling more than witnessing. Witnessing, I mean, you can't witness if you don't tell the truth. It can't be a false witness, right? Has brought just like such wonderful people into my life, just really, really fucking good friends, that I met because we all love poems. And even if, some of us have stopped writing, or even if we all stop writing tomorrow, the wealth of those relationships, it is no small part that they are so rich because those people are poets, and because how has poetry changed my life? It's just so many things. I think it makes me braver, it it gives me permission. Like, I think that practice in truth telling, right? If I can say it first in a poem, if I can think it first in a poem, I think the poem then becomes an invitation to live closer to what language has manifested, right? So it happens first in the written word. And then it gives my physical being permission to like sort of live up to where language has pointed. So I'm very thankful. In that way, I think it's like spiritual practice, right? I think like, I was raised in a very Christian household. I still go to church. After many years away, I started going again. I call myself a little bit of a Christian plus. Like, I do think a little bit broader than I think than my church requires, but it feels good to be able to practice my relationship to the divine through these Baptist traditions. And we always come back to the word, right? And trying to live up to the word of God. And I'll take that a step further and say, I'm trying to live up to the word of Lucille Clifton. I'm trying to live up to the word of June Jordan. I'm trying to live up to the word of Human Win. I'm trying to live up to the word of myself as well, right? All these texts that are, so instructive. Where would I be in the world without Khalil Gibran telling me how to be a better poet or a better person through the prophet? That is my religious text. So poetry, it's that endless possible.
And you're also living up to the word of your future self. And I know that because I've read your different texts from first book to current one. And it seems that you planted the seeds of who you are now through them. And that's terribly thrilling. That goes back to poetry almost as a way of divination. In my culture, we when we need some sort of help to think about things, typically it's the poems of Hafez. You will open it up in any page, put your finger on it, and that poem is supposed to guide you as to what you want to do next. And in a way, that's what you're talking about poetry. You also lead me to a topic that I think both you and I really wanted to talk a little bit about, which is about the fact that you write a lot of love poems. There's the small p politics, the capital P politics, but love poems have been in every one of your books. Today is the anniversary of Charles Baudelaire's birth. And I'm terrible person who runs a prize for books in translation because I cannot tell you who the translator is. But this is so about your books, which is a multitude of small delights constitutes happiness.
Mm.
And I think that's something that you address in a lot of small and large ways. The largest way actually in this book, in Homey, I really felt your passion for your people, your tribe, who, whether named or unnamed, are there with you. They're with you in the poems. But I was rereading Rondo last night, and really interesting long prose poem, which was a great, exciting departure, I thought, for you. But through it, I see the love of place and space. And, how that also is one of your passions and drives who you are and what you love in your life. So I'd love to talk about love poems.
Yeah. I think love informs my politics. Right. I think like the perfect political frame for me is like, how do my actions and the things I champion and engineer make love more possible in the lives of others? How do we love people? How do we love the land? How do we love the future? I think like my first two books were maybe a practice in like loving myself. Homey definitely is like loving the tribe, like you said. And then Bluff is, I think, both sort of leaning into the love of place of Minneapolis, of this particular tribe here in the Twin Cities, and family and friends. And also, I think I've been calling it the book where like me and poetry went to couples therapy. Because I really did after a while, like just need to like kind of figure out like, why am I still writing poems? And I think that's a sort of a question at the center of Bluff, is why poems? And I think by the end of the book, it's a big ass book. So I definitely love poems. By the end of it, shit, I've written 2 books of poems since then. And so it was a really good practice in saying like, I want to love this art form, right? And so I had to sort of wrestle with it through it in that way. It's all love poems. But I think, in terms of that, like sort of thing about place with Bluff, a friend of mine, Tish Jones, once put it into really good language for me, because I kept on like living here for a little bit and then moving away and then living here and move a bit. And I was coming to her. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I had to call her. It was a very tough call. We were working together at the time, and I had to come accountable for some work I didn't do. And just sort of, in the way we had been like in this like weird, like she's one of my best friends, but she was also my boss for a little bit. And I kind of had to like break down for a moment. I just was like, I'm just not happy. There was a lot of other stuff going on too. But I just needed her to be my friend for a moment. She was like, I was concerned about you when you moved away from Minneapolis because this is where your electricity lives. And that's just that word. I was like, oh shit, my electricity lives there. Just that word, the amount of energy that surges through my spirit when I'm here. She was so right. And so I think Bluff is also me trying to like manifest that love of place for the first, what I feel like is really the first time. So expressed in poems, there's like individual poems and other collections that I think, there's like the poem I'm going back to Minnesota where sadness makes sense in Homey. But I kind of felt very insecure about not being a poet of place before. There were friends of mine, Human Win, who I mentioned earlier, just like other folks who I felt like were so obviously from where they're from. And I felt very insecure that I think my poems didn't necessarily have that same local stamp. And so one of my like tasks for myself with Bluff, and I think coming out of the murder of George Floyd here in 2020, it sort of almost demanded something that I was already feeling, that I write poems that were of this dirt here.
Can I push back a little on that? Can I push back a little on that? Because I think you've always written about place, whether or not you've directly named it. So maybe this is the the first collection where you're really naming it. You're literally naming streets. You're showing streets, and I
Mhm.
love the little architecture of the book, which is another reason why people should buy poetry books in hard copy, because I have a PDF of this. I
Mhm.
have three hard copies of it as well, and you can't. It's there's no comparison.
Mhm.
But buy the PDFs if you can't get the books, of course. But you've always been talking about place and space, even if you haven't directly named it. I think you are directly naming it,
Mhm.
and certainly the George Floyd murder was a big part of that.
Mhm.
But place is part of who you are. What did you say? I wrote this down somewhere. My Eden is waiting on me to make it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think you've been making that Eden for a long time, whether or not you've necessarily shown the map, the
Yeah,
street names and all of that.
I hear you. Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, there is, right, because I think like if you think about like Summer Somewhere from Don't Call Us Dead, that is definitely like a place poem, right? Or even like a declaration, right? Like I've left Earth, in search of a new planet from Dear White America. I think America has been the place,
Okay, okay.
for so much of my work. But I think America sometimes can start to feel too abstract, even for
It is
me.
abstract. No,
Yeah.
that's fine. And I also understand the power of what you're saying, because you're saying, sure, it may have been part of my work that was evident to people, but this is the first, it's the same thing as the first poem you read. To actually name and claim something
Yeah.
totally changes the power of it
Mhm.
and the power that it gives you. Like
Yeah.
it's a power that it gives you. So I do see naming things as a very powerful act.
Yeah.
And poets more than anyone have that alchemist power, because
Yeah.
once you name it, it exists. It's
And I
like
think,
that line about Eden.
yeah, and I think I named a great many things. I think what I'm okay. So let me revise what I'm saying. It wasn't that maybe I wasn't a poet of place. Is that I needed to have my relationship to place. um I need to pick up a new tool, right? And the new
Right.
strategies to manifest that for me in a way that I think was satisfying to the questions that I was asking myself at the time, right? So not to
Right.
just sort of say like I had never done it. I'll be kinder to my younger self in that regard. But that I needed to, and I think this is what stumbling upon a new question does for you as an artist. You have to say like, oh, what are the strategies and tools and the ways I need to interrogate this question right now that can't be satisfied, that can't be satisfied by the same tools and tricks that I've done before, or that the work I've done before, which I'm still very proud of,
Yeah.
has not. There's something incomplete that I'm now striving for again, right? That
Mm.
can't be satisfied by like pointing in the past at what I've done, but rather says, let me find this new way into the question, towards something fuller, in a way that I have not done before. Yeah.
Yeah, that I do feel that quite a bit in your work. And this seems like something that is so written into the work that you do that I shouldn't name it, but also this your love and joy, Black love and
Hmm.
joy. And that is throughout this book. And I find that, and again, a very incredibly powerful thing, because it's very easy, even for us right now, to fall into the conversations about all the losses and all the abuse and all of the negative things, but to stay in the middle of that. I see that, that's out there. This is what's
Hmm.
happening. No, but there's joy and happiness, and
Hmm.
there's Black joy and happiness. And I'm not going to only be about the harm that is being done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that lesson for me honestly started at home. So I grew up in a home with my mother, and we lived with my grandparents in their home, my mom's childhood home.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather was a very abusive man towards his wife, towards my grandmother. And that abuse was both known and not talked about, but yet hyper experienced, right? It felt like we could critique it and damn it and shame it within when it was happening to stop it. But then once it was over, you dare not speak of it, you know?
Mhm.
So it was almost these two realities. There was the reality of him when he was drunk on the weekends and when the violence was more either at hand or just like, you know, was like the height and potential of it was felt because now alcohol was in the picture. And then there was like the weekday him, which was the family man who went to work and da 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 and like all these things you didn't speak about who he was when he was drunk. And I refused these. Received these very confusing lessons on love, right? which was like, you know, like I'm allowed to like stop the fight. You know, this is a man that like I've like punched in the face before to get him off his wife. But then like we see these very like you better love him. You better not ever talk bad about him. Like, and I was like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Um, and there's poems through all the collections, but I think the one that I think sort of manifests the real balance of that for me is the poem I Miss That Negro in Bluff.
Mhm.
Where I think like the end of the poem I think is like every poem I think I've ever written about him has led to like the last two lines or the last two sentences of this poem. I plotted his death in the dark of Saturdays. I'd kill the world to kiss him, right? Um, which is that on like a hyper personal level. And I think if I explode that um, to the communal level of like loving, that's me loving my Black grandfather. If I explode that to loving Black people, then maybe I get something closer to Evie Shockley's Ode to My Blackness,
Okay.
where she says, you know, you are my shelter from the storm and the storm, right? There's a little nod to that line in that poem as well. I have that line tattooed on my side right here. Thank you, Evie.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Doc.
Evie,
Yeah,
indeed.
thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you, Evie.
Shockley, man.
Dr.
One of the
Shockley,
best
I
ones.
agree with you. One of the best ones in every possible way. So you know, you're talking about, and it's interesting because I also can't help but see it on the page. You're talking about ghosts and silence as well.
Mhm.
And literally on the page, for me, that is often the white space
Mm,
or the blank space.
mhm,
And I can only imagine what that home felt like sometimes, you know, the heaviness of that.
mhm,
And somehow on the page, though, you're able to take that heaviness, which is very personal, and one, reach out to other people who can understand the feeling, if not the exact situation, but make it a connective thing. Whereas in your life, at least growing up, since you couldn't talk about it, it wasn't connective. It was a
mhm,
distancing. But
mhm,
your poems choose to look upon it as a connection. And I find that uh, incredible.
mm. Yeah, I
You're
think you
you're
have.
you're reframing it. You're reframing.
Yeah, I think you have to take ownership of it, right? I think
Right.
you have to digest it and make it part of yourself. And so um I think I'm thinking about like one of Toy Derricott's instructions for folks at Cave Canem for the years she taught there was always to go and write your heart poem, right? And you know, what is the hardest poem that you can write right now? You know, what is the wound that sort of needs to be interrogated? And then there was also, you know, her lessons about like, you know, the hard poem is something you might be writing for the rest of your life. And I think you look at her
Mm.
relationship with her father and how she's written about that, and you know, all these collections, and I think kind of reaching a peak when she writes The Undertaker's Daughter. Um, but you know, there's a way in which Toy, in all of her loveliness, has showed us to own your darkness, right?
Yeah.
To grab hold of it and to grab hold of what has happened to you. Also allows it, you know, it makes you stop damaging you over and over again, right?
Mhm.
If I can grab hold of the blade that is coming to end me, now it is my weapon as well, right?
Absolutely.
And so I get to now redirect where this blade is going, and I think that is part of the writing of like the Black love epic that is Black American poetry, right? Is like we're gonna tell the story so that the story is not just happening to us. And so we can
Exactly.
find the moments of loveliness even amongst all the terror that we went through. And in that we can also start to build that Eden. We can start to build that future and where we are now beloved and not endangered, right? Yeah, I think there's some that form of
Well, it's the
it gives
superpower,
you a sense
right?
of control, you know,
And
that you have.
well, it's agency. All the poems have a
Yeah,
lot of
agency.
agency, but it's also a secret superpower, right?
Hmm.
If I can, and I find that even hard for myself. I'm slowly getting into doing that sort of thing, where if you really write about the details of your own existence,
Hmm.
uh, it becomes your superpower. Because also, no one can write about you that way. Only you
Hmm.
can write about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that. But though, it's all incredibly hopeful as well. What was it? Principles, and I wrote this down. It hits me so hard, especially now, especially right now, is um, hope is hard, but I
I
have it.
have it.
I need to like put that on my dresser when I get up every, but it's true. Hope is hard, but I have it.
Yeah.
And how much how hard is it sometimes to have hope? I don't mean
Woo!
just in your work and like that's a statement that's very powerful. Doesn't mean you always have it when you say it, right? Like,
Hmm.
but you say it enough times, then yes, hope, well, you do have it. I do have hope. When I read your work, I do have hope. I have a lot of hope.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly hard to hold on to hope, right? I think, there's other places in the poem. My brain is now going to the poem Love Poem, where it's like
Oh,
in the doomed interludes between hope. I try to remember children exist, and so then that poem goes on to say some other things. But so there are these times where like I think that's sort of the curse and the beauty of being a poet um is that we're tasked to see the world with both great imagination and great clarity. And sometimes that clarity will allow me to see the great possibility within us as humans, as people. And sometimes that clarity is, whew, it's so heavy and it leads
well,
me away from hope, right?
it's also temporality.
Yeah.
You operate with different levels of temporality. All the
Hmm.
great poets do.
Yeah.
And if you use temporality, then you can have hope.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it in the moment it can be very, and I find certainly in your poetry that it is perhaps the most assertive act of resistance to
Hmm.
say, I am going to love the
Hmm.
people I love. I'm going to have hope about tomorrow. There's nothing that could be more assertive than that, and
Yeah.
more difficult at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is oh God, I'm about to get Christian. I'm thinking about trouble don't last always, which I think everybody's Black grandma has said to them at some point in time, right? But if you think about that, right, like hope, even if in the darkest moment, if I can hold on to the fact that like the yesterday that was so bright, but maybe in that moment feels so far away. That yesterday was once a tomorrow at some point in time, right?
Absolutely.
And so I trust that tomorrow, even if the tomorrow is dark, that there's another tomorrow beyond that that is full of that hope and that has that place that hope is trying to point me, right? Um, to me, hope is necessary, right? Hope is hard, but I have it. It's not say I don't need like I'm not even trusting when I say I have hope that it's gonna get better soon, but
Yeah, yeah.
um I'm trusting my willingness to wait and to be patient for it. And maybe my patience is that there is no resolution, but I'm willing to wait it out and see. Um,
My Persian parents, who are probably the age of your grandparents, would totally agree with that.
mhm,
Whenever I've been down, they say, "Well, there's always hope. It's not
mhm,
if you're here, there's always hope." And
mhm,
they're not wrong. But
mhm.
sometimes it's hard to have that ability to keep breathing through the hard things and through
Yeah,
what's going on. And what's going on to other people is just as painful. It's not like you sit there and think only of your own pain. It's the other pain. But yeah,
Hmm.
so I said this to you privately the other time. I'm telling you, Preacher is your next.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
telling
because
you,
then I start thinking about other things, right? Because then I'm just like,
poet preacher. I mean, I will come to the Church of Danez Smith, right?
please come.
Coltrane Coltrane had a church in San Francisco. Why can't Smith have one in the Twin Cities?
I don't know if it's preacher. I think somebody the other day, I think Franny Troy was saying like maybe I could be a chaplain, and I think I would maybe just like
Oh,
to
that's
like
great.
help people in moments of prayer. Like I don't know if I need to like give a sermon every Sunday, but I would like to be like somebody that comes over to your house when you're having a rough time. I could do that.
I like
I
that. I
think I
like
could
that.
do that.
I like that a lot. And I do want to interject, and I know that Mackley has been putting this in our chat, but really, if you all have any questions, I'm sure they're better than mine. Please put them in the appropriate place because we will have some time for
Mandana,
Dinesh to be.
nobody's questions are better than yours.
Oh,
But we'll take them. We'll take them.
um, well, you'll be reading a little later, but what is on your mind now? You know why I'm asking? Because so you started working on Bluff in what, 20, as I drop something, on maybe 2020 or so? Is that when some of these poems were starting to come out? Like you were
uh,
starting to write them?
no, the oldest poem in here is probably
Yeah.
from like my like grad school days, so like 2016. But I think Bluff, as it's up, the bulk of these poems probably started coming out in 2022, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's always interesting to me because you've heard me say this. Poets are the divinators. English is the second language of our time. Um, so I can't wait to hear what you're going to read next later because I think those are going to be the poems that maybe have something to do with the times that we have 2, 3 years from now, which is kind of deeply exciting to think about. Um, have you, having read Rondo, are you doing more prose poems? You should be. Or are you doing prose in general? You should be. Look,
Yeah, I'm
look at
doing
me.
prose in
Look at
general.
me. Look at me telling you you should be.
No, I'm doing a lot of things right now. So I think I'm currently have my foot in three different projects. So in the poetry sense, there's a book that I'm calling like my like Bluff hangover. Because at the end of Bluff, I really started to turn the last couple poems that went
Yeah.
into Bluff, all were really obsessed with time. Um, and I think I needed to like I put a bow on the book, and so I sent it in because I had all these time poems flowing out of me, that I knew if I tried to smash them into the book that it'd be something completely different. And so I
Jeff
have this
wants
book
more.
about time.
I said, besides, Jeff wants more books from you. So you can't
Yeah,
smash it all
he's
in one
happy.
thing.
No, so this next book it'll come out. I don't know if it's been announced yet, but I can announce it. It'll come out in 2027, in the early part of that year, and it's called My Sweet Time right now. And so that's all like my time poems are going in there. That's like almost done. I need to do a little bit of collage work still to finish up a visual essay. Um, but yeah, so that book is almost done. And then I have a poem that I'm like writing right now that's like a long poem. There's a song by the MC Drunken Master that is from like the early 2000s. It was on the Fubu released an album back then, and there's a song on there called 50 Niggas Deep, that I love and I view as a love poem or love song. And so I'm taking and like it's like this like song where like he like literally is like counting through, niggas. It's like, I wrote what nothing but them real niggas. One, the drill niggas, two. And so it's just like very mathematical. And so I'm just taking each one of those 50 and taking it and starting a poem with that thing and just like writing a little poem underneath. And so it's just like gonna be this book of 50 poems. Yeah, they're like I just got to 25. So I'm halfway through. So I'm excited to keep on writing that. And then in prose, I am writing a novel.
Thank you. I have my biases. Anyone who knows me knows what my biases are. So I love when my favorite poets write novels.
Yeah, and I'm having a lot of fun writing this novel. Yes, I need to pick it back up. It's been sitting on the desk for a little while. But I'm having fun with it. Like it's been my task. I was like trying to get to a good stopping place with the energy of like the last poetry book I was talking about.
Right.
And so now I think like maybe this week it's time to like dive back into the novel a little bit more. I'm having a lot of fun. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I know where I'm going. I kind of know where I'm going. And I feel like it's very powerful. I love prose now. I used to hate writing prose. And I kept taking commissions from different magazines just to kind of force myself to rehab my relationship to writing prose. Um, and
Do
there
you
was a
like
lot.
reading prose? Do you like
I,
reading prose?
I love
Or do you
reading
really?
prose for sure.
Yeah.
But writing it just always felt like a very different beast. I think I had maybe some like grad school and undergrad like PTSD from writing essays and not really having a fun time with it. Um, but then I kept on taking these commissions, and it would take me an embarrassing long time to make it to 1,000 words. But now I'm on it. Now I love writing prose now. I think it's definitely a different hat that I have to put on and a different relationship to the sentence. Um, but I feel really good when I'm writing prose. I write my essays for little magazines here and there. I do think someday I want to write like an essay collection as well. Um, After the novel, I think there's a prose work or like a nonfiction work somewhere in the future about love and sex and desire and marriage, but also about all the other things that I'm always obsessed with. So yeah, so I think
Desire.
yeah,
Desire. That's a word. Let me tell you.
yeah.
What do you want? I mean, no, we talk about it. We use that word a lot, but thinking of it from through the lens of the way you write and think about things, that's a that's a heck of a word. I'm gonna, can I be really, really nerdy for a second?
Yeah.
When for a second he says, "You're nerdy all the time, Mandana." What do you mean for a second? So you do this a lot. So does Dr. Evie, speaking of the person we love so much.
Mhm.
When you're doing some of your very architectural works on the
Mhm.
page, how is that happening?
Mhm.
You're writing and drawing on the page. I mean, and all hail to the typesetters at Grey Wolf and elsewhere, right? Who do that
Yes.
sort of thing. But how is that? It's so playful. I love that. It's saying, let me totally deconstruct
Hmm.
what we consider the order of language. And once you
Yes.
deconstruct the order of language, then you're deconstructing whatever the powers that be say that language should be, that connection should be, that expression should be. And I love that. I'm a total nerd for things like that. But how are you literally doing it on the page? When do you decide that this idea is going to be a great prose poem? This idea
Um,
is going to be a great, architectural poem. I love
yeah.
Rondo, as you know how much I love Rondo. But
Yeah.
how does that process happen for you if I can get really in the weeds of it?
No, for sure. I think it happens a couple different ways. So I think there's poems like Rondo, where I think my vision for that poem very early on was that I wanted the poem to interact with the freeway in some type of way.
Right.
And I saw something moving through the page and maybe like, rearranging the language and, or displacing the language, which is what ended up happening in the poem. But so that is like one of the rare occasions that the architectural or the visual effect is sort of predates the language for the
Mm-hmm.
poem. I knew that I wanted the poem to look at. I wanted to write a poem about Rondo. I wanted it to have this sort of engagement with a physical freeway moving through it. And that idea came to me probably 5 years before I actually wrote the poem. Um, and I think I think what has maybe changed from my younger years is that I would sort of have an idea for what the poem was about, and I would just try to write it. Where I think now I have to be a little bit more patient for the language to show up. And that takes precedence to idea. So even if I have an idea, then I'm maybe trying to attune my listening and say, okay, where does this want to start? But otherwise, I think most of my poems are like sort of arriving language first, and I'm like, oh, this is what you're about. Um, and so I think some of the other architectural poems, I may be taking the lyric as far as I can take it, and then I reach a
Mhm.
point where just attending to the language is no longer helping me edit. And so I start to then say, okay, well, what are the visual opportunities in this work to sort of, can I bring in some other element? Can I look at it less as can I look at the blank page less as just a receptacle for lines of poetry and more like a canvas? And does that allow me to like bend around a corner and get to the next point where the poem wants to go? And so I think that is probably a little bit more common. Is just like I'm just writing a poem. I typically write in either just like prose poems or couplets, just because of where I tend to write. I think most of my drafts nowadays are either happening by hand or they're happening in my notes app on my phone,
Right.
or my notes app on the computer, which feels like a very low stakes place for me to write poems. And so, yeah, it's like either couplets or just like one sort of block of text, or a prose poem. I think, yeah, when I'm writing by hand, I tend not to be worried about line breaks. I tend just to be thinking about language. And so then just like some like, just some like play comes into play. And then I'm just like, oh, maybe I want to try this in different stanza fragments. Then I'm sort of maybe looking for the opportunities for line breaks in the work, and that helps bend the editing in a certain direction.
It's
Yeah.
immensely open for the reader, I think, because that kind of poem, I'm I get to start where I want to start, right?
Mhm,
And I get to go in different directions that I want to go. And it's like a choose your own adventure type of thing in a way.
mhm,
So I think from a reader's perspective, it's endlessly interesting. And my philosophies about poetry is that great poetry like yours is a relationship.
mhm,
Every time, like, so I had put this book down for a while, obviously.
mhm,
And when I went back into it last night, I was like, oh my goodness, why did I not see this, this, and this, and this? And
mhm.
poetry gives that relationship to us. A poem changes every time we read it because we change every time we read it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a very discreet thing, it's immensely discreet that way. It's kind of interesting. So I guess I'm gonna ask you, do you ever go and look at these poems again and say, oh, I didn't see this when I wrote it? Where the divination comes for you personally?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the nice part about walking away from work for a little bit, is that like it's just kind of too much to hold in your head.
Right.
So sometimes I'll pick up, I think I have this relationship with Homie a lot more. Definitely with Bluff. I think Bluff, maybe because it's newer, I think it's still a little bit closer to my memory. But I do read Bluff and I'm like, oh yeah, you did the thing.
You
Um,
did do the thing.
you did your thing, man.
You did the thing.
But I think Homie for me, I think Homie, it was a rather difficult writing process. It was like the least, for the most like love and joyous book that I have. I think it was the hardest book to write and to get across the finish line. And I think I learned a lot about my process from writing Homie. I think I maybe would have asked, retrospectively, I was like, oh, I think I maybe just even needed like another year to sit around and have some thoughts with that work. I think when I think about the book often, especially in the years following, I just sort of had this antagonistic relationship to it. Or I didn't remember having fun while doing it. And so I was like, oh, I hate Homie. Da, 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 da. It's a horrible book. But then every time I pick it up, I'm just like, oh, like, you did your thing. You really like that line. Or here's this thing that I didn't see I was doing. Or like, oh, wow, Danez, that was a risk and a choice. And you really did some fun things that I can see myself having fun, even in the midst of the frustration that I felt trying to make a cohesive, like, sort of good work.
Well, you refer to Homie in this book, like the thing about my presidents,
Yeah,
which is a poem I love actually in Homie, but
I
to
love
kind of
that.
refer, I love it. But the way you refer to it was like, wow, you're talking to yourself in that book,
Hmm.
and you're also talking to where we all were at that time, where we were just joyous about this, that, and the other, and
Hmm.
reframing and saying, looking at the world now,
Hmm.
maybe I can look at it this way. Very odd question that had occurred to me. Have you ever thought about doing other chapbooks? Because I think poor chapbooks get short shrift, don't they?
Hmm.
Like they were always considered a stepping stone to the collection. And I think there are things that a chapbook can do that nothing else can, and they deserve to have more love than they do. Have you? And you can
Oh,
say
for
just no,
sure.
Mandana, I
I
haven't.
love a chapbook. I read chapbooks. I think my problem is that every time I try to make a chapbook, it explodes and becomes a full-length collection.
That's
But
not
I
a
agree with you. I
problem.
think
That's
they,
wonderful. That's
yeah,
wonderful. That's not a
I think
problem.
they, but I do think, I think you're right. You know, there's something about just like those, like, you know, sort of 20, 30 pages of just like, I'm just gonna follow this thread, just like enough. And it just, a good chapbook feels like reading a full-length collection, right?
Absolutely.
They're so full of thought.
It's like an
You know,
EP. Are you old enough to remember EPs?
of course. I mean, we still do EPs. The people still doing EPs, you know. Some of my
Like
favorite.
in not in vinyl form, you don't. I mean,
No,
that's
not in
my age.
vinyl, but like, you know, there's some music artists that are like, you know, they'll put together like 6 or 7 songs and call that an EP.
Yeah, a really good chapbook is not that easy to do.
No,
And when
no.
it's really good,
And there's
it
no
can,
space
oh
for
no,
lack.
no,
You know, there's no
no,
space for
no.
anything lazy. You know, for Bluff, I thought there was a point when I was putting together Bluff that I thought about borrowing. Well, I thought it was fresh when I first thought of it, and then I realized every time you think you're doing something new, Ann Carson has already done it. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll break this up into like five, or I had like broken it up into like 5 or 6 like chapbooks, and I was like, oh, maybe we'll just like release like, you know, like
Instead
a
of
collection of
chapbooks,
smaller chapbooks as the book. And then I was like, oh yeah, Ann Carson's already done it.
doesn't matter. It
Um,
would be you doing it. I would love like a. So I have box sets of cassettes. That's the whole thing. I mean, where am I going to play them? But I have box sets of cassettes. I would love the box set.
Yeah, maybe one day it'll still happen. Maybe that'd be maybe for the 10th anniversary of Bluff, do something
Oh,
like
that
that.
would
Cause
be
that could,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I see that. I see that.
yeah.
There's something very, and it's funny we're both talking about music because there is something deeply musical about your work, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm going toward these kind of musical metaphors
hmm
because I see that very, very much in your work, and also how I love hearing poetry aloud because I grew up hearing poetry aloud, and by people who were not necessarily educated, but they knew their poetry. And so I love the way you read poetry aloud. Because it's performative, but it's not only you performing it. You know, I feel like you call in other entities for
Mm.
you to say the poetry aloud. Is how important is that to you when you're testing poems out? How important is that speaking it aloud and hearing the musicality of it? And how much does that sometimes change what you end up doing with the poem, if at all?
No, yeah, I think writing poems is a collaboration between my eyes, ears, and hands, and mind, right? And so there are certain things that the ear can catch when I'm trying to go for sound, that the eyes cannot see, right? So I do, you know, sort of have to do the muttering to myself. I think most poets do, right? You kind of got to talk to yourself a little bit just to get the work in the air.
Right.
But you know, I think I'm not trying to get every poem to that space. There are poems that I choose not to read out loud because I don't think they offer themselves up over to the air quite as receptively to the moment of performance, right? And so I might choose to just let them be a book thing. That's not to say that they couldn't. There are some poems that I'm like, oh, I think this would be great as a performance work, or like there's that poem, the poem sonnet that happens in like 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
So I want to do some video work to bring that poem to life, is how I see that poem best being performed. Um,
Oh, I'd love
but
to
yeah,
see
so I
that.
think there is a performative element that I love. You know, when I first started writing or performing poetry, one of my favorite spaces to read poems was a spot here called the Blue Nile. And at the Blue Nile, you could you play when you read your poems. You could play with the band, right? And the band would back you up. They'd listen to you. And so I do kind of feel like there is you know, and maybe this is also just like, you know, some ton of Afro retention, right? But like there is sort of the unspoken drum that I'm hearing in my head, right? That that sometimes when I'm what maybe manifests is like sort of getting silence into the work, is like sort of me waiting for the right drum beat. So there is that relationship. But I love playing with musicians. I love playing with drummers, especially because there is, my language is but one percussion and one language
Yes,
that's
it is.
right. So then there's that relationship back to the drum often. So yeah, so there is a musicality that I'm intentionally reaching for because I want to illuminate the rhythms in the word that the eyes just reading on the page might not be able to catch. And because
And
now I have a body, right? And like
yeah,
if the poem, you know, my books, I like try my best to write them. But I want my work to be a different experience when I, of flesh and blood, am in the presence, to be able to lift them up beyond that script. Yeah.
there's a great choreographer, Ron Brown, who runs
Mm.
Evidence Dance Troupe, and some of his earlier work, he would have spoken word poetry,
Mm.
and the poet themselves doing spoken word poetry as the dancers dance the choreography, and it was mesmerizing. It was mesmerizing, and I think sometimes poetry doesn't get enough opportunity to be physical, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah. I like that a lot. So, you know, I've pretty much I think we've decided what you're gonna be doing for the next 5 years of your creative life.
I got work to
Because you
do.
know, because all these people are listening, you know, you're basically committed. I don't think you can get out of
I
this,
do.
you
I
know.
have to write the novel. My husband also says I have to write the novel too, because we want a house, so I got to write the novel. So
You
yeah,
definitely have to. Yeah, novels buy houses, right, Charles? Yeah,
novels by houses for sure.
novels buy houses. You know, I do think how much in love you are personally really does also come through the work. I'm not saying that you have to be in love to write good work, but I see the added dimension
Oh, thank you.
in terms of how you feel about life. It does
Yeah,
come through.
it's changed something. Yeah, thank God for
Yeah,
my
it
baby.
changes something. Yeah, he feels exactly the same way about you. This I know. Um, so we're getting close to the point where we might be asking questions, but I want to see what question haven't I asked that you were thinking, boy, I'd like to talk
Oh no,
about
I
this.
feel like every time we get to talk, it's so rich and full. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know
What
what you have.
okay, I'll ask you a question before we have you we have questions and then we have you read again. Uh, What's the one poem in this book that you read the most out loud and why? Like
Oh,
when people say, would you read for us? When they say people, would you read for us, Danez? What poem do you always go for? And why do you always
um,
go for it?
I think it's the first poem I read today. I think it's uh, Day was the last person I came out to, which I think is so not the center of the book. Um, but it's one of you. It's the first poem I've ever written and read out loud where I often get like active like ahs at the end of it. I think I'm in love with that feeling. Like I like, and like there are some poems from every book that are like the criers. And so
You've
and I
seen
think
me in
like
your audience, haven't you? Like,
yeah. And and I think, any poem, there's always one poem that like I can get some laughs, I can get some ums, and if I can get some tears out of it too, that to me, I'm like, okay, if I can only read one poem from this book, I want people to feel I want them to land someplace lush and felt and maybe want to go back into the world and love a little stronger. And so I think that's one of the poems that helps, that does that in the book. And so that's one of my favorite ones to read for sure.
did you ever share that poem with
I
your
did. I
author?
did. I gave him his copy, and there's like I have like a beautiful picture of like him reading the poem. I think it brought our relationship a lot closer than it already was. So yeah, and I think he was just like, oh, like we always talk about my work and my travels and stuff like that. And I think it did something for him to be like,
Oh,
oh,
see,
I'm
now
part
that
of
did an
this
awe
too.
for me. That's really,
Yeah.
oh, that's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I mean,
Mhm.
um, your work, do you tell everybody in your life when you have work coming out, especially if
I
it's
do.
around them?
I'm not ashamed. I don't like. I think maybe my humility sometimes errs on the side of like, I think I've had some people tell me like you need to like brag about yourself a little bit more.
I agree.
But my work is my work, and I
Yeah.
think like I'm not ashamed of it in any type of way, right? So I like let folks know they're like, yeah, books coming out, da da da. But I'm not like I'm a bad self promoter.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah, yeah. My business brain from 20 years ago says yes. Most of the really good poets are terrible self promoters.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to say anything else beyond that, but
We
most
are.
of them, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know you have a hard stop coming up, and I want to be really respectful of that. So, Magley, are there
Thank
any great questions you
so
want to
much.
share?
This has been so lovely. We do have quite a few questions from the audience. The first question is from Sophia, and Sophia says, I'm having such a hard time ceding control during my writing. How do I ignore my ego and let my writing go in the directions it needs to go? And is there a protocol for the days in which fear feels so much stronger than love and hope? Do you still try to write? Please and thank you.
Wow.
Oh, that's a great place to write for. I don't know if fear is something you should ignore. I think, embrace it, Sophia. And maybe, yeah, maybe sometimes, maybe that's part of your poetics. I think I often write from a place of fear. And then maybe I can edit it when I feel in a more hopeful place. And let those two times meet each other in the body of the poem. Any protocol for like letting go of control? I think form is a great tool for that. Um, I will forever champion A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson, particularly because of the introduction to that work. It's just a very brief one-page introduction where she talks about reaching for the heroic crown of sonnets because she needed this like strict formal element to sort of buoy her from this emotive topic that she felt herself like kind of constantly sort of being not dragged down by in the sense of like it was a slog, but like she couldn't write about the death of Emmett Till without sort of losing herself within the emotion. And the form sort of acted as kind of a buoy, right? And so if you're having trouble letting go, then I think let the rules of form sort of wrestle control away from you, right? One thing I love assigning to students who like I feel like a lot of writers sometimes will cut themselves off at the knees by sort of erring towards brevity. And I feel like one of the things I'm always asking for from my students, I know they get sick of me, is like, I just want more. I just want, I feel like the poem was just revving up and then you ended it, or like, oh my God, this part at the end is really where I feel like something starts to open up. What happens if we go beyond that? And so if it's like sort of a thing of like you're cutting off the poems by trying to protect yourself, I say write a crown of sonnets because it sort of mandates that you write for a real, real long time, right? There's a lot of poems of mine. I started writing a lot of longer poems, I think, especially when I started writing Homie, it was because I sort of like needed to know where the poem would take me if I
Mm.
gave in to the possibilities of length. And oftentimes there was a lot of feelings waiting underneath what was like, would have maybe been a nice, 10 line or maybe sonnet length poem. Once I submitted to length, then, just that, it started to just trudge up a lot of things that needed to come up. So try forms that scare you, try forms that feel very foreign to your own process or to the own shapes that your poems tend to take. Um, and I don't know, uh, write about things that maybe okay, I'm gonna give you a very specific prompt. So I don't know what to tell you how to write about. I want you to first write a poem at least 10 lines long that is only made of questions. And then you're going to take each one of those questions and write at least a 5-line poem that attempts to either further investigate it or answer it. But first, a poem only made of questions, and then a poem for every question within that poem. Try that out. especially
Danez,
if the questions scare
I'm
me.
going to try that out too. Are you kidding me? That's
At
I want everybody on this call to try that out. What are they crazy not to?
least
It's
it's some good
great.
times.
Yeah, yeah. I won't share it with you though because that would be embarrassing. But yeah, I might try that myself.
Thank you for that question, Sophia, and for that answer, Danez. The next question is from Zion. Zion says, how do you connect or reconnect with your ancestry as a Black queer person? What do you think about inventing our own ancestries and our need to connect ourselves to our history?
Word. So I practice ancestor veneration. Like to my little right over here is an altar that I maintain with some pictures of my family and some some candles and some flowers and some aloe and some cards in case they feel like playing and a whole bunch of other lovely little items that I keep over there. For them, I actually haven't fed them in a long time, so I need to put some food over there. And yeah, so I do that to stay connected with my ancestors. I read, and I invite their language and their practices into my work. I think I am never far from the work of Essex Hemphill, of Baldwin, of Jordan, of Hughes, who I just did a project um, with or for, however you want to view that. Um, so I think we connect with our ancestors by communing with them via the evident or the treasures that they've left for us, by naming them in our lives and in our work, and like reaching to them in their language to sort of sample and play alongside, and through just like living our lives a little bit bolder, right? I think
Mhm.
like while it is a turbulent time to be alive, it is also a wonderful time to be alive. And I think about all the privileges I have to be able to live my life so loudly. Um, that the people who readied this world for me to be here maybe did not. And so one way we can connect and please our ancestors, especially as queer folks, is by allotting ourselves abundant access to our joy and to our pleasure, and to our anger and to our fight. So I think, every time I'm like, rallying for some shit. And every time I'm like really having a good time, I think my ancestors are pleased and they're with me. Yeah. And then like build them a little altar as a way to say thank you.
Thank you for that answer. We have two more questions. The next is from Ian. Ian says, can you talk about the similarities between going to the gym and writing slash submitting poems, thinking maintenance on self?
Oh, going to the gym and writing poems. So I think in a couple like lectures I've given, I like talk about how LeBron James is like the best basketball player in the world, but he just doesn't show up to the games, right? He goes to practice and he goes and does like strength training and all this other kind of stuff, right? There's like NFL players who like go take like ballet classes to learn how to move more skillfully on the field. So I think about that in relationship to form. I think be developing a formal practice will help you become a better free verse writer because it's almost like resistance training, right? If I can learn how to move within the bounds of a ghazal or of a sonnet um, or of a sestina or whatever form you might try to write, those skills that are found within the restraints of those forms come back with me when I'm sort of writing in the open field that is free verse. So I think though that's one relationship. I think like the gym, where I go to the gym and I'm gonna go to the gym after we get off this call. I go to the gym so that way I can like live my life longer and easier. When I go to the gym, like on the days I really don't want to go, I tell myself like, Danez, you need to go to the gym because you want to be an old person who can move. Or Danez, you really want to go to the gym because like when I first started dating my husband, I would call it sex training. And I was, I was like, I can have better sex if I can move my body and be stronger. A little crass. But that's what I think about as like the real benefits of of going to the gym, right? It's not just so I can like look better, sure. If that's the type of look you're going for. But it allows me to be more flexible and stronger in these other areas of my life. Also gives me some time to live in my body and not my brain a little bit. I also write a lot in the gym. There's several poems in this time book I'm writing. I think a great many of those poems started in between sets and me like pounding away on my phone, in between sets at the gym. So it's an opportunity to turn your mind off. I do think there is a harmonious and sometimes a what's the opposite of harmony? A cacophonous
Discord.
relationship
Yeah.
between body and brain, right? But I do think that my writing is better when my body is better, when I'm attending to my body in terms of moving it, in terms of feeding it good things and treating it well and talking about it well, that this thing gets better too, right? And my head is clear. And sometimes I skate too. And so sometimes especially with the skating, I often say like, oh, it's been a heavy brain time. I need to go someplace and think with my body and not my brain. Just turn the brain off. And unfortunately for me, turning the brain off also gives it the space to turn back on. And so like by the end of a skating session, I'm usually sitting in the corner typing away at something. But yeah, so I think that is the relationship that I see of like, give yourself practice. And what does the gym look like for writers? Maybe that's form, but I also think that's like writing, or I'm sorry, that's also reading. That's also going to the museum. That's also listening to music. That's also going to concert. That's surrounding yourself with the creativity of others. Because it's not just the gym, right? It's like, the gym is only part of it, right? Sorry, I'm stuck in this analogy or this metaphor now. Where like I can go to the gym every day, and if I'm feeding myself like crap, I'm not going to see the results. And I can also write every day, but if I'm not feeding my spirit and feeding my creativity, the writing is going to stay stuck. And so, the gym in order to see results in the gym, you need a good diet. And in order to see the results in your work, I think you also need a good diet of what you're taking in artistically. Are you feeding yourself with the inspiration of the creativity of others, so that way you are able to actually output when you're tasked to be the creative yourself?
Magdalene, forgive me, I have to ask a question. What kind of skating do men?
Oh, roller skating
I
on
like
the
it.
four
Okay,
wheels.
I
I
like
go
it.
backwards, I go down, I go up, I go around, I do all the things.
Very cool.
Amazing. We're going to wrap up the Q&A now, Danez, to give you enough time to close out with a reading and honor
Sure.
your heart out.
Word. Thank y'all. Also, I think my heart out is a little bit softer now. So if there is one more question, I think I have enough time. But also don't want to hold up anybody else's time too.
It's a brief question.
Okay.
An anonymous audience member was wondering if you had gotten a dog yet.
Not yet. No, my husband told me I can't ask about a dog for another 2 or 3 years. And I
You
respect
better
that
finish that
because
novel. You need to
I got to
finish the
finish the
novel.
novel. I have to make him a stay-at-home husband, and then I think I can have whatever I want. Because the thing is, I travel a lot for work, and he does not. And so he is very correct in that, yes, we can have a dog. And like on days like today, when I'm at home doing stuff like this, I could take care of the dog. But I'm getting ready to go to, Washington for 4 days. And so that's going to be his dog. Um, Da-da-da. So no dog yet. Although I did also I'm gonna say it publicly, so maybe I can pressure him. That I think I did reintroduce the idea that like I want a baby. and maybe he should let me have one. And I don't really want one, but like maybe. And I would just like the maybe to exist. All right.
I love how you put that at the very end of this hour and a half
I
conversation.
did. Well, because
That's
and like
smooth.
honestly, if
No,
I'm being
it's
real about
smooth.
the dog is
Yeah.
like my like bargaining. I'm like, okay, if I can't have a baby, you're gonna give me a dog.
I,
And I just think I would be a wonderful
impressive
parent, and he thinks
bargaining.
he would be a wonderful parent,
Of
and I
course you
think,
would.
yeah. But also,
Uh,
then I can't be a childless homosexual, and I love being a childless homosexual. So we're going back and
well,
forth with it.
I like to say that I'm a spinster witch. I think there's some relationship between the spinster witches and the childless homosexuals.
Exactly, we
Um,
have a great relationship.
can I just say one thing before we have Danez read? I really want to thank the Brooklyn Rail, especially
Amen.
Chloe, Maglie, Elizabeth, and Min, and all the love in the world to Danez. So much love for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Brooklyn Rail.
Thank you, Brooklyn Rail. Brooklyn Rail, y'all are fantastic. Thank you, everybody over there. Thank you, Miss Chaffa, for being my conversation partner over time. We could talk anytime. I would talk to you every day.
Me too.
Um,
Me too.
okay, I'm gonna read a new poem from me, and then I'm gonna read two poems by some other folks that have been, or maybe just one poem that have been bringing me a lot of peace. What should we read? I'll read this one. This poem owes a debt of gratitude to Joseph Earl Thomas for a lecture he did at Randolph last semester that introduced me to an essay by Christina Rivera, who in an essay oh God, where's that book? Is it near? Five manifestos for a better world, edited by Christina Sharp for the Alchemy series. And in that collection, Dr. Rivera has an essay about the subjunctive, in which she also has like a part that particularly meditates on a poem by Alabama poet laureate Ashley M. Jones. And I was very inspired by the lecture and the essay and then the poem. And so this kind of came out of me in response to all of that. It's called In a Subjunctive Mood, a Prayer. Wish be so, a block where we could forever, dead end on which we if eternally. Inshallah, oh Allah, Almighty may be curving God's suggestion in our favor. It is essential that faith open a door into the declarative, into command, or not. A door where our possible seeks no conclusion. Let me not get too big for my bridges, but bridge us over the doubt and into the good advice of living. If paradise was to exist, I'd meet you there for tea, a hope in hand to promise your feet silk as water. If he walked on water, if he came out the cave a poet, if the sea was the first step in freedom's long road, if he is born again and again and again, the child knows his last life. If God has that many doors, I know there is somewhere, I know there is somewhere where the end is not written, where we live unceasing and the dead are still dead, but they live close as neighbors, close as lovers in the morning. If there is morning there, I know the birds are there. If there are birds there, I trust the map in their song. If there is a song, I know it's for no funeral. If there is no funeral, then what does our bravery have to fear? And if there are funerals, so what? If they kill us, we'll join the wind. If we win, what could hold us? what could touch? All right. That's a little peek at the new poems. And then this one, I've been reading and crying a lot to Sarah Kay's A Little Daylight Left. Sarah's first full-length collection in a long time. I think I want to say something that I hope isn't too limiting to Sarah's work, because I think her work is for everyone. But I do think that Sarah writes some of my favorite poems to put into the faces of young people, to put into the hands of young people. And that is in no way to diminish their power in revelation in the very adult soul as well. Yeah. So I picked, this came the other day in the mail, and this is the second poem in the book, or the first poem after the preface, and it just made me, made me cry. So I want to share it with y'all. Ode to the two girls in the outfield of the T-ball game. Somewhere nearby, a ball is hurling through the air or tumbling towards the pitcher's mound, an orchestra of parents erupting into the spring breeze, but we don't know anything about that. We have forgotten the game entirely, have forgotten that technically somebody is supposed to be left field and someone right, that we were given instructions about looking skyward and keeping our gloves poised and ready. We have forgotten the gloves, have abandoned them, our fingers interlaced or braiding blades of grass. There is no left or right here, just field. Just butterflies and bees, the soft hum one of us offers of a song we might or might not know. One of us has a tooth we can wiggle. One of us puts on our glove as a hat. We are making wishes on eyelashes and pinky promises. Somewhere there are girls who keep their eye on the ball. Somewhere boys who grab for a wrist when a girl rounds the base for home. Out here, there are only dandelions. Well, I am wearing the same jersey as you, but mine has a different number and yours is backwards, and that is enough to make us laugh. We laugh and laugh and laugh, and a planet blooms in our laughter. Our planet is open for business. Business is trading sunshine for freckles, and business is booming. The sky is laughing. The sky has forgotten the game entirely. Somewhere, somebody is winning and somebody is losing, and they are wearing the same jersey as we are, but they have forgotten the point entirely. Soon, someone will call our names. Someone will summon us back to earth. Someone will grab our wrist and remind us the rules, but not yet. Not before we have named every cloud, compared every freckle, serenaded every bee. Teach me how to cartwheel like you. Press your body into the grass beside me. I want to be able to see where we once were.
Really?
Oh my God. Okay. Okay, maybe I'm feeling inspired now. I'm gonna read one more poem that's of a very different energy. Okay. This is from the book Strange Beach, poems by Oluwaseun Oleiwola. Oluwaseun Oleiwola. Who he's based in London. I think he's from Texas originally. We got a chance to meet when I was in London this last go round for book tour. And I love his poems so much. They remind me of Carl Phillips. They remind me of, oh wait, he has a couple poets he's listed on the back here. Okay. Steeped in the poetic traditions of Claudia Rankine, correct. Jory Graham, correct. Louise Gluck, correct. Carl Phillips, very correct. And Kevin Young, correct. And I also think there's a little bit of like a of just like a Black queer mischief in there too that is not named on that list, which maybe is what makes him wholly original. So yeah, I really, really enjoy his poems. And so I'm going to read the poem Simulacrum. There wasn't love, but there was what love becomes. Sheet wrinkle, skin dune, arm ropes lassoing our neck flesh with push and pull, equal amounts, the hurt convincing its shape is false, the relation, the record moment he likes to record, the recorded moment he likes to record, not true. Then the film buffering, the unfinished triangle your body scopes on top of his. Frustration, yes. Rejection, oh yes. The colons ring hammering, waking up, not again, not tonight, tight, loose, bloodless for now, dragging a palm across the brick wall, now blood for now, streaming from you like scripture. Spit of him landing atop your eyelid, that puddled need. And there is freedom. There is intention to break your back in half and call it what you asked for, what your separateness will not allow. Rattle of wooden slats, indentations in the linen, this body you are finally inside of, being molded into the cushion's canvas by what desire has given him permittance to do tonight, tonight only. He is not a perfect fit, and that is perfect. He will not stay the night. He will not stay. Hard night, leaking night, no fine point, needled stars. The sky is a masculinity. He starts the car. Likes to be called daddy, needs to be called something, anything. There is your obligation. You're obligating. You're obligating. Yes. Call it gratitude. Be grateful. Give thanks. Give. Shut up! Oh my God! Oh, I love that poet. I love those poets.
The sky is a masculinity. Is
the sky is a masculinity. What? Shut up! Oh my Lord! Oh, I hate poets, yo. Get on my nerves. Just like, who? How dare you? Damn poet. Oh my God.
We love you, Danez. We do
love you.
Thank you both so, so much. This has been so wonderful. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with our friends at Montez Press. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much,
much,
Yes,
everybody.
wonderful.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Both. That was
poems.
awesome.
That
Thank you
was
for the poem. So
amazing.
good.
Amazing.
Amazing.
So
Thank
enjoyable.
you.
Love it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.